Welcome to today's Table Talks. My name is Scott Kappelman, and I'm joined by my co-host Clark McGehee. Clark, how are you?
I'm so excited. I'm over the moon for this topic today. I'm very passionate about this kind of stuff. I think this should have been my major, which I've shared with you before.
Yeah.
You know, this is where I thrive, this topic right here about finances.
We're talking about money today, and it could be that if Clark ever gets burned out on ministry, maybe you can go work for the Dave Ramsey organization.
You know, maybe I can. I don't know.
Something like that.
Something like that. I really enjoy this kind of stuff.
Okay, so in our previous episode, if you missed that, we hope you'll go back and watch it on YouTube or listen to it on our podcast. We were discussing how to evaluate our relationship with money. We're not going to rehash that, but today we move into the second part of an outline that you created. So explain to our listeners what our focus will be in terms of money for today's episode.
Sure. So the first episode was all about evaluating your relationship with money. And now this episode is going to be focusing on managing the money. So once you've understood that, you know, money comes from the Lord, that you need to be able to give and you need to be able to just not put it above God. Now you need to learn how to actually manage the money for the Lord's kingdom, right? In order to grow his kingdom and in order to help others in their situations as well as your own family.
So let me chase a quick rabbit.
Sure.
And we were talking about this just a moment ago before we started recording. You said to me that you think most of the people in your age group are not good at managing money or may not even know how to manage money. Am I correct in that assessment?
You are absolutely correct. And I mean, I've spoken to a few people about this. You know, I'm passionate about it. So maybe I have really just spoken to the people that are outside of the norm who don't know how to manage their money. But I think from just the general consensus I get from spending my time around people, I think that it's most people today just have no idea how to manage their money.
Now, were you required in high school or were you required in college so far to take a class that taught you how to manage money?
So I actually wasn't. Health and economics is a requirement in high school. They usually do like year-long classes, you know,
right.
But health is one semester and economics is the other semester. But if you're in a sport, that overrides the health class. And, you know, because it's a year-long class, even though economics is supposed to go along with it, at my little small high school at least, you ended up not being required to take economics. So I never took it. And then I've never taken it in college. So I think that's a lot of the problem today, is that people aren't being taught to do it.
Going back to when I was in high school, which was just shortly after the dinosaurs disappeared on the earth.
Right, exactly.
The only class I remember taking that was similar to that would be accounting. And for some reason, I don't know if that was an elective or if it was a requirement at the time, but I took Accounting 1. And our teacher, of course, she was trying to teach us how to do accounting in a business setting, but she did have a section where we talked about personal budgeting. And so we did have a little bit of exposure to it. And I guess because my dad was a pastor and my mom was a teacher, I mean, they'd lived on a shoestring budget most of their marriage. Now, I don't remember them sitting down with me and talking specifically about how to budget, but I do know they talked a lot about we can only do this month because we only have this amount of money. So those kind of things came into play as a child.
That's the same scenario for me, and I've just always been great with numbers, so I think that's what causes my passion for it. But to chase another rabbit, I know we only have 15 minutes, but this is just a quick, funny story. My friend in community college, my best friend, actually, he from like childhood, and if he was listening to this episode, he'd be so embarrassed that I'm calling him out. But he had a job in community college, and none of us did. And he was making pretty decent money
for a community college student.
For a community college student. I mean, he's making all right. And he would always say stuff like, I have $7 in my bank account right now.
Even though he made that money.
And I would be like, where is this money going? And I genuinely don't know still. I don't know I don't know if he was in some kind of business that I shouldn't ask questions about or what the deal was, but I don't know where his money was going. But unfortunately, and this is why he'd be so embarrassed, this is still him today. We sat down one day because he was talking about getting married, and I sat him down, and I have a budget pulled up here that I can talk about, and I made him an entire budget. And he said, thank you so much. Like, this is awesome. And I talked to him about a month later, and it was like he hasn't been using it, and he hasn't been looking at it. And I just was like, okay, I did what I could for you.
That's amazing. Well, our marriage, we had to learn how to budget along the way simply because Kelly wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And so she had been teaching. I was serving as a pastor. And when she decided she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, we had to figure out how to do that on one income. And that's probably when we started the process of learning how to be good at budgeting. And then she became a really big Dave Ramsey fan. We've been through the Dave Ramsey course once together. And so every night at our house, the last thing we hear is not the Lord's voice, it's Dave Ramsey's before we go to bed. So anyway, that's just kind of a side story.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive into Scripture and show the importance of budgeting and learning to manage your money.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to start with Proverbs, and I'm going to go to chapter 13, and I'm going to read verse 16. Every sensible person acts knowledgeably, but a fool displays his stupidity. And the only reason I read that, it doesn't say anything about money, but it just shows us when you want to be sensible, you're going to gain the knowledge you need. And in this case, if you want to be really good with money, again, keeping it in its rightful place, you're going to study this and learn how to do it well. And then I've got one more verse before I'll turn it over to you for some verses, but I want to go to Proverbs 21. And I would like to read verse 5, and this is where it says, "The plans of the diligent certainly lead to profit, but anyone who is reckless certainly becomes poor." So if we're diligent in these matters of money and manage it well, we're probably going to make a profit. But if we're reckless, we're going to always be poor, which may explain your friend who started making money early but still doesn't have any money to this day. So what verses do you have for us today?
So I have 1 Timothy. I only have one verse, and it's
Just
1
one?
Timothy chapter 5, verse 8. And it's very simple. It's talking about instructions for the church, instructions for individual members of the church. And verse 8 says, "But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." I just wanted to highlight this verse because it talks about the importance of actually managing your money well. You know, you have to be able to provide for your relatives and for members of your household. And I think that in that, you know, it requires a budget. It requires, you know, saying no to some things while saying yes to others. And it's maybe not, people can twist this verse to say that they don't need to give as much, but I think it's specifically talking about saying no to some things and yes to others, and just being able to say, you know, this is the amount the Lord has given me, this is how I'm going to use it. And a lot of people just don't do that at all.
Yeah, Paul, I think, spends some time talking about the churches to take care of widows, but it's only after their own families have tried to take care of them. And if their own families can't do that, then the church can step in. And so even in that pattern, it's an affirmation of kind of what you're talking about. You've got to learn to manage your money to take care of your own family, maybe extended family members in their times of need. And then if those don't work, then the church can step in. So it is an important topic. And the only other verse I want to give, and then we'll get into some practical discussion, is where Jesus says in Luke chapter 14, verse 28, "For which of you wanting to build a tower doesn't first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, after he has laid the foundation and cannot finish it, all the onlookers will begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This man started to build and wasn't able to finish.'" So again, this is about money management, doing some cost evaluations on the front end and figuring out what you can do and can't do, and not overstepping your boundaries too early and ended up looking like a fool in the end.
Right. That's really good insight. I'm glad you added that in. I want to quickly go back and then to the practical, but to verse 8, and to just say that this is why the first episode was so important, is because, you know, managing your household and taking care of your household can be interpreted many different ways. And last episode we talked about, you know, continuing to push that budget up. But again, just wanted to plug the last episode there.
That's good. Okay, so practically, any thoughts you would have that you could offer to our listeners that might help them learn to be better money managers?
Yes. So practically, I would say download Excel.
Okay.
I would just say maybe Google Sheets if that's your thing. And then this is a format that I made myself, but there's plenty of resources online to say, you know, Excel budget. And the way this one works is I type in a number under the appropriate slot. So I have one for grocery, one for restaurants, one for other, and then one for gas. And that's how Annabeth and I, my wife, deal with the budgets. Then we have some things that are set that, you know, like rent and tithe and all those things. Those are set amounts, but those are all fluctuating depending on the month. And I just, in the box, I type in what I've spent, each time I spend something. And I don't even always do it the exact time. I go back into my bank app later, type in what all I have done, and then it just spits out a number for me of how much we've spent this month.
How much is left.
I subtract that from how much we make. And then, it's really not too complicated. And that's I want that to be my encouragement. I think a lot of people, because they haven't been taught, they think that it's this really big foreboding task. And it's really not. You're going to have to say no to some things. But as far as at least keeping up with it, maybe it'll be keeping up with how much you're going over, but you can at least keep up with it. Right.
So I use a very similar format in Excel. I've created sheets just like you have for each category, and I probably have a few extra categories that maybe you don't, and that's okay. I have one for basic. Those are just every month cost.
Right.
I'm going to have one for gas and auto. I have one for miscellaneous. I have one for groceries. I have one for medical, for dental. Because in my case, my job is considered self-employed. As an ordained minister, I'm self-employed. So there are some tax breaks that I get if I can verify with receipts, especially when it gets over into medical, dental, some of those things, housing. And so I have some other categories that just help me when it comes to tax season, count some of those as deductions being self-employed. But I'd use the same process. I have an Excel spreadsheet. I've got it set up where the amount for each month is at the top, and then as I enter deductions or expenditures, it automatically subtracts and gives me what's left in that category. The other thing I was going to just mention, there are two ways to do budgets. One is you can look at the entire year and divide it by 12. But I think there's a better way to do it, and that's probably go month by month, because there may be certain months where you have greater expenditures in your miscellaneous than you will others. And so if you kind of do a month by month, I think it comes out probably more accurate than just taking a large number, dividing it by 12 for a monthly amount. So you feel the same way?
I definitely feel the same way. I think that, we have been a testament to that. There are some months that you just have to spend more.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality.
Especially you get down to Christmas, you're going to have Christmas gifts somewhere in October or November, and you're not going to have those in January through September.
Right.
So you can factor those things in if you do it month by month, which is really easy. One of the practical suggestions I would say is to take your salary, and you could do it this way. Take out 10% for giving, take out 10% for savings, and try to live on 80%. And that's usually the best simple general rule of thumb. And if you're living on 80%, you're always going to come in under budget, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a quick suggestion. Now, early in marriage and maybe early in life, it's kind of hard to do the 10 and the 10 and just live on 80, but that's kind of the end goal, I think, for most people.
And so actually, I'm so glad you say this, because this is where I do want to talk about, the Lord does tell us in 1 Timothy 5:8 to be wise about our money so we can spend it on the household. But I do want to talk about just the way that the Lord ultimately provides, because not to toot Annabeth and I's own horn at all, but we do this 10, 10, and 80. And I would even encourage to try to push farther than that 10 on the giving and give even more. And we're able to do that while putting away money and living on 2 part-time incomes. And this is an amazing story, actually, but I have my budget. I'm so passionate about it. And right now we have more in our bank account than the numbers on the budget say that we should have.
Wow.
So it's just, I want to not preach the prosperity gospel, right? But to say that the Lord is going to provide ultimately.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back and say we are a testament to that as well. We didn't have a lot of money when we first got married, but we did kind of try to budget our money as best we could. And I think Kelly she was teaching at a private school, a Christian school in New Orleans when we first got married. She made $12,000. Mm-hmm. I was preaching at Mount Vernon. They paid me $14,000. And then I preached at a second church a couple times a month, and they paid me $4,000. So collectively, we had $30,000. And we survived on $30,000 as 2 people. Now, again, that was many years ago, shortly after the dinosaurs. But nonetheless, it was because we tried to budget and live on less than we made. And we made it through those tough years.
Yes, sir.
And so the Lord does provide. I think He expects us to be good stewards, and then He provides in addition to that along the way.
So real quick, to reach those people who do struggle with finances, especially people my age, how can we do that in a strong biblical way while also practically giving them some advice?
That's a great question. maybe the most practical thing I can think of in this episode is it might be beneficial for churches who have, and I don't mean this in a mean way, older couples who have been successful with their money be paired with a college student or a young couple, and they could mentor them. That does not mean the older couple takes the finances of the younger couple and dictates how they use it.
Right.
That would be like being parents.
Yeah.
But they could be a resource for that younger couple when they have struggles financially to say, how can we better manage this? And when you sit down with that elderly couple and they've done it well through the years, they've got wisdom to share. And they can probably show the younger couple or the younger individual, here's some ways you're probably not thinking about that you could save money, or here's some ways you may be overspending. And if you'll just delay your gratification for a little bit, you can get that, but it may come down the road. And I think that outside objective wisdom might be one way for this to be done. It gets more practical. It's more hands-on. I mean, you could take a Dave Ramsey course. You can listen to the Dave Ramsey podcast, and you're going to get some tips. And there are other groups besides Dave Ramsey that you could listen to. But I don't know. I think maybe part of the church's work of discipling could be in this area of money management, pairing older people with younger people.
I totally agree. So my encouragement to any listeners would be that if you're a younger person and you struggle to, keep up with your finances, maybe search out this older person who can help. And if you're a younger or an older person, but you do well with budgeting and with finances, then maybe to search for those people who don't, and to, be willing to kind of take them on and just give some easy practical advice about this may be where you're struggling, like you added.
Right. The only other thing I would encourage you to do is maybe consider, there are some apps. If you don't want to create Excel spreadsheets, there are a couple of good free apps that you could download, and it will track your money, and it will help you kind of see, as long as you're in the green, you know that you're within the categories amount. If it turns to red, you've overspent. And there's some pretty easy apps that people can use that are free. And for some people, that's a better way than trying to do it with an Excel spreadsheet. So that's another option.
Right.
But anyway, I hope this has been helpful. Any other quick final thoughts on the management of money?
I just hope this didn't feel too much like a Dave Ramsey episode.
Yeah, me too.
But no, I think those are all the things I had.
Okay. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this part of our money discussion. It's part 2, and we do have one additional section that we want to talk about. We'll get to that in the 3rd episode on money. But we hope this has been helpful. We'll create some discussion and stimulate you to have some conversations with people you know that maybe don't do money well, or maybe do money well. You can have this as a biblical topic, and we hope this has stirred that discussion some. We hope you have a great day. Come back and join us for the next Table Talks.